why do you create these podcasts and why you do it? Well, one of the things I begin to realize is that I tend to have some bit of excitement about my community, people who look like me. And as I begin to look and have conversations, I begin to see all of these nuances in relationships, things like codependencies, narcissism, good, wholesome people, salt of the earth, people who really, really care, are getting caught up in what we would consider somewhat toxic or horrible relationships that require a different type of healing. Jay, I'm going to hit this button to get myself unmuted. So let's see if I can. Let me know if I come in louder or the same.
A
So
little bit louder.
a little bit louder. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
So I reached out to Lisa and I said, Lisa, it is so hard to find speakers on this topic. And I don't know what it is. I ask people and they say what they say, but it's just kind of hard to find people on these topics. And I loved her response. I said, Lisa, thank you for, agreeing to be here, but tell me why, right? And she says, because I care. And I love that response. And without any further ado, I'm going to try to bring Lisa on the screen with me, and we're going to see how this works. Lisa, how you doing?
Hi, Calvin. Thank you for inviting me to your amazing community.
Awesome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Now, I noticed you were a little quiet on the trivia, right? Were you just, being very charitable because we discovered that our speakers can be competitive, right? Were you just kind of holding back, right? What was going on there?
I knew all the answers, so I didn't want to be like, hey, I want, that wouldn't be fair. And I
Awesome.
also wanted to see what your community understood about codependency and narcissism too.
Awesome. Yeah, it's kind of cool, right? Typically I would do some sort of trivia, but I said, wait a minute, what if I do trivia on topic, on theme? And I'm always surprised, right, with what I hear. So it's kind of cool. So, here at Soul Thursdays, we love a solid, awesome origin story, right? How you got to where you are today. So if you don't mind introducing yourself and letting us know who you are and how you got into the work that you're doing today.
So my name is Lisa A. Romano. I'm titled the Breakthrough Life Coach because the kind of work I do, really, you inevitably end up having breakthroughs in consciousness. Most people don't know that they're born asleep. They're in a theta brainwave state up until about the age of 7, which is a hypnotic brainwave state. And what that basically means is that as a child, you're being brainwashed to believe in norms, to believe in essentially a child will adopt the impression that their parents or their families or their peers have of them. So a child doesn't even realize that they're forming a sense of self based on what's happening outside of them. It's not their own sense of self. It's coming from outside. Everything comes from the outside. And I was born to 2 adult children of alcoholics that were very immature. My mother was very codependent with my dad. My dad was more overtly narcissistic, but my mother was very emotionally abusive towards me as her first child. And I internalized that. I thought I wasn't good enough for love. I watched her fawn after my father. She was a big people pleaser. She had a few faces. There was a face for the church people, a face for the neighbors, a face for the children, a face for my father. It was super confusing. And so I learned to watch what she was doing with my father, which is try to please him. So I tried to please her to gain her approval. And that just carried on throughout my teenage life. And eventually I married someone who was a lot like my mom. And after 12 years of marriage, my immune system was declining rapidly. And a doctor told me that all of my asthma, my migraine headaches, the rashes, they were all emotionally induced. And he said, you better listen to your body because your body is listening to you. And I had this breakthrough moment where I thought, I'm supposed to be listening to myself. So that was really profound for me. And I went to about 5 different therapists before I found one that said, you're not crazy, you're codependent. You came from an alcoholic family, a long line of alcoholics. Nobody got healthy. Nobody acknowledged there was a problem. And so, yeah, these are the symptoms of you being codependent is an effect, but being raised by these 2 people, that's the true cause. And that set me on a path of, well, who am I then? And through therapy and through really understanding, wait a minute, I've been programmed to think a certain way. So who I am, who I think I am, isn't even the real me. It's this reflection of this outside that I've just adopted. And I'm not going out like my mom. I'm not, my grandmother committed suicide. My other grandmother was an alcoholic and she died a miserable death. My mother was miserably unhappy with my father, but never had the courage to get out. And I thought, I'm
Well,
not going out like this. And so, but it was scary because I didn't know who I was. So all I knew was that I couldn't stay in my very dysfunctional, toxic marriage with someone who I think was more of a covert narcissist. This is someone who everybody likes. He's the mayor. He's someone outside. You know, he's the preacher that's abusing the abusing his wife and kids at home, but the congregation thinks he's awesome. So that was mind bending too, because I knew what people saw and I knew what people understood, and I knew they would never believe me because my reality wasn't exposed. So it was a really tough time, but I swore that if I ever figured it out, I was going to teach people about codependency. I was going to teach them about narcissism to give them the language and the tools to understand what they were dealing with. Because if you don't know what you, excuse me, if you don't know what you're dealing with, you're going to stay stuck. You can't fix a hole in the wall you don't see.
wow. OMG. What a testimony. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that story. And as you're speaking, you reminded me of how I became so intrigued by this topic of codependency. And I recall, picking up a book, Codependency No More. It was a long book. It was kind of academic. It was a hard read, right? But what I took away from it is that, whoa, there's this correlation between, this alcoholism and relationships. And I really couldn't figure it out until much later. So tell us this. How do you define codependency? And what are some signs that someone might be struggling with to help them understand it?
Well, codependency is invisible. And in my opinion, it's an emotional dis-ease. So you don't have a sense of self. It's not a positive sense of self. The problem with codependency is you don't know that you don't have a self. You're just full of anxiety. You're afraid of disapproval. Your mind is always worried about everyone else but yourself. You drop everything to help someone else. You take care of other people at the expense of yourself. You find self-worth in what other people think about you. So you're an other focused versus self-focused and autonomous. You don't wake up and think, what am I going to do today? What's my favorite color? What do I want to eat today? Where would I like to go today? You generally think, how can I help someone else today? What does this other person need today? And you lose yourself in the people pleasing. Also, what people have to understand is that this really is invisible. So you can be trained by a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic father, even a codependent parent. You can be trained by a family to just shut up. Like, don't talk about what's going on inside the house. Don't embarrass your family. Don't tell anybody dad's an alcoholic. Don't tell anybody your sister's a heroin addict. Don't tell. So it's this no talk rule, right? And so now I'm being taught to cover, to worry about what other people think about me. And now I'm being taught that my sense of self is coming from whether or not I can make these authority figures happy, keep them happy. So codependency is, it's, if you are codependent, then you're probably a very anxious person. You're worried all the time. If someone's upset with you, you feel crushed. You think about it for a day, a week, a month. It really sets you back. You can't let it roll off your back. If you try to stand up for yourself and someone pushes you back, and you assume responsibility for it. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. You cannot handle the silence between you and a friend. If your friend is upset with you, or you're upset with your friend, and there's a little bit of distance, a little bit of silence, that makes you so uncomfortable that you have to be the first one to say, I'm sorry. You can't deal with that silence. So you lack healthy boundaries. And so when you're codependent, you don't know it. you're people pleasing, you think you're a good person, you see yourself as a peacekeeper, you're being taught that you're a good person for not rocking the boat. So it's really tough to pull yourself away from. But if you're codependent, you're in probably in a one-way relationship with your husband, with your wife, with your children, with your mother. You don't even know it. So these conversations are really important because they cause people to check themselves. Is that me? Could I be, did I come from a toxic family? Did I ever go into therapy for that? Do I seek approval? Do I lack personal boundaries? Do I know who I am? Do I know what makes me happy? Can I say no to somebody? Or do I feel like I don't have the right to say no to somebody? So these conversations are really important because codependency, to heal, you have to awaken, you have to recognize the symptoms.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. You know, we've used a few terms tonight. We said we talked about codependency. We talked about narcissism. In your experience, what are some of the most challenging aspects of recovering from narcissistic abuse? And if you don't
Oh,
mind helping us understand and link the two, because I feel like there's a correlation or some relationship between narcissistic abuse and codependency. What are some of the most challenges and aspects of recovering from narcissistic abuse? And please let us know, how does narcissistic abuse relate to codependency?
right. So the reason I bring it all together is because often adult children of alcoholics, adult children of trauma who've experienced emotional neglect, they develop fawning as a way to survive. So fawning is seeking after your mother's approval, shutting up, not causing any problems, shrinking yourself just to avoid abuse or neglect and to hopefully gain some type of an attachment. And that fawning behavior, that people pleasing behavior doesn't disappear. Remember, you're being brainwashed as a child. So it becomes a part of your personality traits. So the external world creates your personality. That's really important to know because that means that if you can control what's going inside of you, you can shift traits and you can change your life. So that's why I link childhood trauma, codependency, it's a coping skill. The problem now as an adult is that you are other focused and narcissists are self focused. So that's a hand and a glove, right? So a healthy person is really not going to put up with narcissists too long, but you can be a healthy person, non codependent person with a lot of empathy and just think, eventually he'll get it, or eventually she'll get it. I'll just try harder. So, or I know why they're narcissistic. I know why they're abusive. So you have so much empathy for them that you're giving them a pass for the abuse. So that's not good either. But narcissism in general is this has to be a pervasive pattern because we can all be narcissistic and we can all be reactive. We could all have bad days. But when it comes to narcissism, you're looking for a pervasive pattern. This isn't somebody that's ornery on Monday, but 360 or let's be gracious, 340 days of the year, they're pretty kind, empathetic, but we're looking for a pervasive pattern of a sense of grandiosity. They're better than everybody. They're jealous of other people. They also lack empathy. So your best friend's dog died or their grandmother died, and they're just like, so, right? So they're 5 minutes late. They shouldn't be late. There's no empathy for what the other person's going through. They hurt your feelings. They cheat on you. It's your fault they cheated on you. You should have been a better lover. You should have made smoother mashed potatoes. You should have known what I really wanted and I wouldn't have cheated on you. So it's a lack of accountability. There's a sense of entitlement. And so they deserve preferential treatment. There's also this sense that they're a lot smarter than they actually are. So they are delusional. In other words, like their narcissism is based on a false story and a false narrative that they play in their head. And so they need people in their life that are going to hold up that mirror for them. And a codependent is the perfect person because they're other focused and they're born to please you. So they're not on planet Earth thinking, how can I please myself? Their personality makeup due to trauma is, how can I please this person? And the narcissist's mind is, how can you please me? I need people in my life that can please me. So it works until it doesn't work anymore. In my case, it worked for 12 years until my immune system was giving out with stress. I knew something was wrong, but I thought it was me. And no matter how hard I tried to please him, it was never enough. And so when I said, I have to go into therapy, he said, yeah, you're crazy because I'm happy. You're unhappy, so you're the crazy one. And in therapy, I realized you're happy because I try to make you happy. I do everything to please you. You have nothing to be unhappy about. I'm drained, dude. Right. So once that started to click, I realized I am really in a dysfunctional relationship. He doesn't see any of this, has no empathy for what I'm feeling. And so that's the relationship between a codependent and a narcissist. It works until it doesn't work anymore. And that's why I love having these conversations. And like when you reached out to me, I said, any opportunity I have to talk about this to help people wake up, get a little still, question, could that be me? Could that be my mother? Is that what my sister's going through? Is that what my brother's going through? Because without this conversation, we don't create the gap for people to be able to self-reflect with this knowledge.
Yes, 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 indeed. I mean, the words you're using are so crystal clear. Other focus versus self focus, and they fit together like a glove. It can't get any clearer than that, right? I can only imagine dealing with such a relationship can create all types of wounds. You often talk about invisible wounds. Can you explain the concept of invisible wounds and, you know, that what it is and how it works? What are invisible wounds?
There's invisible wounds are the emotional wounds that you can't see, and they're essentially their symptoms. So an invisible wound might you can be gaslit, which is you're dealing with someone who is messing with reality. So they're saying the sky, you're saying the sky is blue, and they're saying no, the sky is yellow. You just don't see it correctly. There's something wrong with you. And if you take that to the extreme, like I wasn't cheating on you, that's all in your mind. She's just a friend. If you weren't so jealous, you wouldn't have an issue. This creates psychic wounds, this distrust of self. So now I'm shaking all the time because I don't trust my own inner perceptions. That's an invisible wound. Abandonment trauma is an invisible wound, but it leaks energy because what happens is when I have an invisible wound that's abandonment trauma, psychologically I try to pretend that I don't have that wound. So I develop a mask as a codependent also because I'm afraid that if you see how worthless I am, you'll leave me, and that's going to trigger this wound. So there are all sorts of invisible wounds: low self-worth, distrust of self, feeling unworthy of love, feeling unworthy of abundance, of peace, of a healthy relationship, the fear of criticism, the fear of being vulnerable. There's so many invisible wounds that are caused by, I think, childhood trauma. But even if you didn't have continued a seriously abusive relationship as a child or experience as a child, you could end up in an extremely toxic relationship with a narcissist, and you could be wounded each and every day. It will affect because you're in a constant state of stress. Stress affects your nervous system. So your cells are basking in cortisol, which is like basking in acid. And so the systems of your organs, systems of your body, your organ systems begin to break down. And you can reach a tipping point where now we're developing a malignancy. And so these are invisible wounds eventually manifest.
Wow. I'm sharing your information on the screen about your website and some of the work you do. Tell us about how you help people identify that they're in a relationship with a narcissist, and tell us about, maybe even I like to ask the question what your ideal customer looks like, right? The person who comes out and speak with you. Tell us about your services. Tell us about, how you help someone identify that they may be in one of these relationships.
Well, when I first started, I just wrote my book, The Road Back to Me. And I wrote my book while I was separated, eventually divorced. And that was just, I felt like the story was bigger than me and the fear of losing my family, because I can't tell this story about being born to a family that really caused me to grow up feeling invisible and developing codependency without talking smack about my family, but it was true. So I wanted to just help people by just writing the story. And before long, it went to an Amazon bestseller overnight. And then before long, people were emailing me. So I began talking to them. Eventually, became certified as a life coach. And then so many people are interested, I developed a YouTube channel. So I started helping people just free information on YouTube. We're up to like 685,000 subscribers. We just hit 70 million views on YouTube. So constantly giving free information just to try to increase awareness around codependency and narcissistic abuse and childhood trauma. These days, I do personal one-to-one coaching and mentoring. It could be short-term or long-term. And in addition to that, I've created 3 main coaching programs that all work off of each other, that make up the Conscious Healing Academy, because I don't think that you can heal from trauma without raising your consciousness. It's just not possible, because trauma is a consciousness. Codependency is a level of consciousness. It's a particular paradigm. And so you're not going to break through that until you elevate your consciousness. And once you elevate your consciousness, you can create a different paradigm and thus create a different life experience. So you would start with the 12-week breakthrough coaching program, then go to the masterclass, and eventually Soul School, a course in the quantum science of love consciousness.
Awesome, awesome. I shared in the chat where the audience can follow you, but just so the people who are listening to the replay, there was a question. Jay, what was that question? It was, where's the book? Where's the channel? Do you mind saying that out loud so for the recording?
Sure. Me or the?
Yes.
Okay. So the name
Yes.
of I've written 7 books, but the first book that'll really drive it home for you is called The Road Back to Me. Codependent Now What and Codependency Manifesto are actually award-winning books. So they've been voted the top top 100. They're in the top 100 books of greatest books on codependency of all time. So, and my YouTube channel is, if you just Google my name on YouTube, Lisa A. Romano, you'll find me.
Lisa A. Morano.
Romano, yes, like the cheese, Romano.
Yes. We'll make sure, Jay, if you get a chance, if you don't mind putting that in the chat for us, and if you can find that book, that'd be perfect. We can drop it in a link so people can click and purchase. Love it, love it, love it.
And Stacey has a question if we get to that.
Yes, we're definitely gonna do. Let's see. Let me look at this last. Let's do Stacey's questions. Go ahead. Let's do Stacey's question.
She says, how can a person who is other focused find another person who is also other focused so that they can pour into each other? That's what I really don't get.
We don't want that. We don't want that, dear one. We don't want that. That's not autonomy. That's enmeshment. That's 2 codependents. And that doesn't work out either, because neither one is coming from a place of the true I am. This is who I am. When we have someone who's pouring, there's nothing wrong with being in a relationship and giving your all. I'm in an amazing relationship with my husband. I adore him. However, I adore him from a place of autonomy. And so I am my own person, and I meet my own needs. I have my own hobbies. I have my own interests, and we meet in the middle. So codependency is this: 2 people leaning on each other in an unhealthy way, because if that person collapses, you're going to collapse too. So interdependency is what we're shooting for. I know who I am. I know how to take care of myself. I love myself. I know I'm worthy. I can set a boundary with you if you get snippy or snarky. You do something you're not supposed to do. I'm not afraid to tell you how I feel. And so once you develop that level of autonomy, then you meet someone, you'll actually attract somebody who is much healthier also, because you're going to be able to identify if you're dealing with a needy codependent, or even someone who's counterdependent, somebody who pushes you away when you try to get too close. Yeah, so you'd still pour into each other, but from a healthy way. What does the Bible say? You can't pour from an empty cup, right? So you want to make sure that your cup is full before you enter into a relationship, because if you don't do that, you're going to end up enabling that relationship. That person's going to end up resenting you, perhaps, and you will not have clear boundaries. And now you're doing things to make each other happy, and neither one of you are really actually happy.
Awesome, awesome. So let's transition to questions. I have one or two more questions for Lisa, but let's hear from the audience because we definitely want you to get your questions in. And what an awesome thing, a blessing to have someone like Lisa who really cares, right? OMG, I must have reached out to 30 different, you know,
Mm.
experts, right, on the topic. Lisa responded, and I'm so thankful that she's here. And her message was, because I care. What are the questions we have from the audience? We have one from Lola. Jay, you mind reading that one?
Oh, I'm caught up in Lisa's books.
Yes.
Lola
You
says, when children of alcoholic families complete treatment, why do they get into the same type of relationships?
Oh, dear Lola. So now we're getting into it. So remember when I said earlier that when you're below the age of 7, you're being brainwashed? You're
Mhm.
literally being brainwashed. So the neural circuitry of your brain, you're actually developing neural pathways that mirror this toxic dynamic. And your level of consciousness, you can go and you can become aware of a behavior, but on an energetic level, therefore an emotional level, you're still going to find these alcoholic patterns familiar. And what happens in our mind is that our mind interprets familiar as attraction. It is attraction, but attraction is like attracting like. I had to really work very hard when I was in codependency recovery to recognize that I was attracted to men who were like my dad, who were highly narcissistic, more like the bad boys. I didn't want to be with that person, but I just felt myself energetically drawn to that person. And then when I really worked this out, I realized my mind is interpreting this attraction thing as romantic or is something that I should be pursuing. And I had to retrain my brain. No, girl, that's not what we want. This is what we want. That's unhealthy. So we attract what we know even after treatment. And so we change our consciousness. So it's not enough to change your behavior. You have to change your consciousness. You have to understand this at an emotional and spiritual and cognitive level if you're going to break through.
Awesome. Awesome. We have time for one more questions. I got a question I'm holding, but let's see if we can get another one from the audience. Another question from the audience? Well, if not, I guess I'll ask. Stacy wants to know what's your IG.
On my Instagram, at Lisa A. Romano.
At Lisa A. Romano. I'm trying to pronounce that correctly. I'm going to have to look at
Yeah,
it.
it's okay. It's like Ray Romano. Everybody loves Raymond.
Ah,
Oh.
okay. I'm struggling, but I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, Stacey says she was talking to you, Calvin.
Oh, she's talking to me?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Oh,
Oh, I'm struggling.
you see Samara's question?
Yeah, let's get a question up here. Let's see. Go ahead and read it, Jay.
How do you help a codependent or narcissistic person seek help?
Well, the reason, I mean, narcissists don't seek help because they don't think they're doing anything wrong.
They
So,
showed.
They live in
so
their best life.
they just, there's nothing wrong with me. They confuse, they think their arrogance is confidence, for instance. So they think that being rude to you and cruel to you, speaking down to personal customer service people, they're standing up for themselves. They don't see it as arrogant and condescending, dismissive. They don't see it that way. So they're generally not going to be people that go into therapy. They might get forced into therapy if they're at work and their manager says, listen, you have an anger management issue and you have to go into therapy. Or their wife or husband threatens to leave them. Maybe they'll seek therapy that way, but it's not because there's this general awakening and self-awareness, like there's something wrong with me, I'm hurting people and I want to fix it. So with codependence, you have a much greater chance of sending them a YouTube video or talking to them about their childhood or asking them if they see a pattern in their relationships, asking them, well, who are you? When I went into therapy, my therapist said, who are you? I said, oh, I do security at my kid's school. I run a business. I'm a wife. And he said, that's not what I asked you. That's what you do. That's not who you are. And my brain farted. I was like, what does that mean? I couldn't believe that I did not have an answer for who are you. And that really, really scared me, because I thought, I have 3 kids and I'm raising them and I don't even know who I am. How can I teach them who they are if I don't even know who I am? And so you can talk to someone who you think has codependency, and you can ask them those questions like, who do you think you are? What makes you happy? What are your dreams, and what are your goals? Most codependents, their dream is to make someone else happy, is to make someone else's dreams come true, is to just take care of people, you know. And that sounds lovely, but you know, there was a nurse, and hospice nurse, that wrote a beautiful book on what it was like to be the end of life care for so many patients. And she said there were like 5 questions that she asked, and they had all similar responses. The number one response was, I wish I lived more for myself instead of others. So
Wow.
that's very profound. That's a codependent person. They lived their whole life making everybody else happy. They had secret desires to travel to Europe, or to start a business, or to get a divorce, you know, to whatever, but they just wouldn't do it because they were so worried about how their dreams would affect other people.
Wow. Other focus versus self-focus, the codependent versus the narcissist. Thank you,
Mhm.
Lisa, for being here today. Thank you for sharing not only your story, your testimony, your witness, but your journey.
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping us hip and letting us know how tricky this world can be to navigate. One last question. What message do you want to leave with our audience today about overcoming the challenges of codependency and narcissistic abuse?
I think that the Greek philosophers would say you should know yourself, that you should spend just as much time exploring your inner self as you do anything. We all get our nails done, right? We all watch, food videos, how to make this, how to make that. We all travel, right? We all, want the latest gadgets. But if we're not spending time understanding who we are, where we've come from, how our environments have affected us, then we really don't know who we are. And unless you know who you are, you can't bring that out. Your light can't shine. And the reality is you are enough, but oftentimes you're programmed in such a way that you're operating from belief systems that have been created when you're an itty bitty child that cause you to fear rocking the boat, fear saying no, fear going after your dreams. And if you don't know that's what's happening, you're going to stay stuck. So spend time investigating yourself, asking yourself these deep questions. Always look to learn. That is in my opinion, that is the number one success habit of people who really break free, is that they're curious about who they are.